Recognize Mr. Heck for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it.
And by the way, same offer.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Ranking Member Tsongas, very much for the privilege to be here today and talk with you about the Billy Frank Jr. Tell Your Story Act. Basically, do two things. It would rename the Nisqually National Wildlife Refuge. It happens to be located in the 10th Congressional District of Washington, which I have the privilege to represent. It would become the Billy Frank Jr. Nisqually National Wildlife Refuge. It would also mark the spot where the Medicine Creek Treaty was signed in 1854 and designated a National Historic Site. Billy Frank Jr. was the foremost advocate for restoration of Native American fishing treaty rights in the Pacific Northwest. He cherished clean water and salmon and was a key voice in the recovery of the Puget Sound. It also bears mentioning that he very proudly served as a member of the U.S. Marine Corps. Billy had a deep love for the Puget Sound region. That was reciprocated. The Puget Sound region has a deep love for Billy. He got along with everyone and was an open and inclusive person. His energy made our community better. Of course, Billy didn't stand up for what he believed to be popular. His purpose came first. Like many courageous leaders, he was criticized, he was challenged, but he never gave up. He went from a kid fishing at the riverbank to creating the Northwest Indian Fisheries Commission, which he chaired for about 35 years. He worked on both sides of the aisle, had a deep respect for every member of this body, testified before this committee numerous times. He mobilized tribes to combine their efforts to reach maximum effect. For this and so much more, he was awarded the very prestigious International Albert Schweitzer Humanitarian Award in 1992. In fact, in 2010, Senator Dan Inouye nominated Billy for the Nobel Peace Prize. In his nomination, Senator Inouye noted how, despite the healing left undone, this simple native fisherman from the Pacific Northwest stirred the blood of all who hear him, and he leaves a lesson of love where he goes. Billy passed away 1 year ago in May. He isn't gone. His story is here in these halls, which he roams so very often, and on the numerous occasions before this committee. He was an important voice here. And his story is in the Nisqually National Wildlife Refuge, which we now protect to give our wildlife clean and a sustainable home. He was born and grew up at Frank's Landing, just a hop, skip, and a jump from the refuge. He fished in the Nisqually River, in and around the refuge. That's the location where he was arrested, yes, dozens of times, for exercising his treaty right to harvest salmon. As I said, this bill will rename that refuge after Billy Frank Jr., and it also calls for the creation of a National Historic Site at the place of the signing of the Medicine Creek Treaty, and allows tribes to have input as to how that story is told, in order to not disrupt the jurisdiction of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Department, which has jurisdiction of the refuge. We would propose to amend the bill to make it a national memorial rather than a National Historic Site. That'll make it consistent and efficient. Whenever people ask Billy, how do you advocate for fish, for water, for rights? Billy always said, tell your story. When people go to the Billy Frank Jr. Nisqually National Wildlife Refuge, they'll be able to see why he held fish-ins. They'll see why he risked arrest. They'll see why he ultimately worked with others to help protect his home. Like many young people today, he fought for what he believed in. And even after recovering his treaty right to fish, he made a new career working with lawmakers to build consensus on numerous sustainability efforts. Billy once said, I don't believe in magic. I believe in the sun, the stars, the water, the tides, the floods, the owls, the hawks flying, the river running, the wind talking. They're measurements, he said. They tell us how healthy things are, how healthy we are, because we and they are the same. That's what I believe in. Please let the story of Billy Frank Jr. and the story of the Medicine Creek Treaty be told at the Billy Frank Jr. Nisqually Wildlife Refuge. With that, Mr. Chair, I thank you again very deeply for the privilege to be here, and would ask your permission to submit to the record resolutions from the affiliated tribes of Northwest Indians and the National Congress of American Indians in support of H.R. 2270.
Without objection. Mr. Heck, we thank you for your testimony. If you have a few moments to answer any questions the committee might have, that would be great. If not, we understand your schedule is pressing as well.
I'd be glad to try to the best of my ability, sir.
Thank you. I've only got one question, and that involves the amendment that you suggested, designating it as a national memorial managed by the Fish and Wildlife Service instead of a national historic site managed by the National Park Service. Again, your reason for that is?
Because the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Department actually administers on-site the refuge, and so rather than create multiple jurisdiction in a single site, it would be more efficient. It's important to add, however, that the CBO has scored this as zero impact, but we don't want in any way to cause an overlapping of jurisdictions or a duplication of efforts.
I think the amendment's very wise, particularly given the fact the Park Service has its hands more than full with managing $11 billion of maintenance backlogs. I have no further questions. Ms. Tsongas.
I have no questions, but just to thank you so much for bringing Mr. Frank Jr.'s story here to us in Congress. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Ranking Member. I should also acknowledge the presence of my friend and colleague, Mr. Newhouse from Washington State, who is a co-sponsor of this, and as indicated earlier, as is every member of the House delegation, both parties from Washington State. Thank you, Mr. Newhouse, again.
Great. Mr. Malfa? Mr. Newhouse?
Well, I would just add, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My thanks to Mr. Heck for bringing this bill forward, a fitting tribute to Mr. Frank. And I'm an enthusiastic supporter and would hope that the committee would look upon this favorably. And again, thank you very much for bringing it forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. MacArthur? Mr. Hardy? Mr. Heck, thank you very much for your testimony, and we'll look forward to seeing this bill before us in full committee.
Thank you, sir.